1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Hi again. Or hi for the first time. If you're watching this, I wanted to start so much more slick. Should we pretend that we're doing the intro again? No, just move on. I've just woken up from a nap, and then I realized my voice was radio ready, and then I also realized I just want to get this done today. Again, it's more important the habit and the consistency and the effort than it is the content. I mean, you may shake your head at me like I just did to myself as I say that and think, really? The container? But it is. I think part of it, like, okay, sorry. So I'm saying the container is more important than the content. By that I just mean the effort of putting things out there is more important than what's being put out there. I wish that weren't the case. I wish that actually, the most refined, thoughtful, and brilliant art and self-expression rose to the top. And it, in some ways, does, but in most ways, when we're talking about social media and online content, it doesn't, right? I've been tuning in to, like, the same set of kind of domestic, just a little bit of street noise, the same sort of domestic Beckettian, as in Samuel Beckett, absurdist, existentialist, life-rotting on TikTok for years. I'll tune into someone's life as they talk through what I should be doing instead of scrolling on TikTok. And they run me through what they have done, made dinner, planted a garden, raised children, or whatever else. Now, there's no children waiting to be raised by me, just to be clear. But, I'd rather watch someone's process on their language learning journey than do my own French practice. It's absurd. I'd rather watch someone's fitness transformation and continue to hang on to my, if only I had time to go to the gym, than actually put the phone down and go to the gym. And so I know that that's deeply true for me, and I know that it's also deeply true for others. And the kind of strange paradox or bind at the center of this is that I do nothing without external accountability. And I feel like that's just made me stumble on to the theme of today's episode of this not podcast, but thing that we're watching and experiencing together. Thank you for that. And thank you for commenting on the last one. If you did, and if you haven't, why not? Put your 2 cents in. The internet invites everyone's opinion, and it asks you to give it with full force and preferably with as little knowledge or connection to the topic as possible. And if possible, wrestle with someone else in the comments too. So get in there. Let's have it out. No, thank you so much for all the kind of thoughtfulness and sensitivity and kindness that appeared, and anything else that appeared in the comments too. The fact that you gave me some of your attention and focus is definitely feels like these days to me such a more powerful economy, the economy of focus, than money and the exchange of cash, because that's all we've got is our focus and the decisions of where we spend it. So thanks for spending it here. On accountability, I, as mentioned in the last video, probably have a little bit of the old ADHDs, to be confirmed later this year when I can get a free GP assessment or cheaper GP assessment in Victoria. But until then, I'll just talk about it broadly in the specific qualities that apply to me, but maybe they apply to some other people that also may or may not have a diagnosis. But I think for me, accountability has been something that I've struggled with my whole life. Struggled with in a really, for the most part, unclear, mysterious way. When I was growing up, my both significant teacher, but as well as parent, would always say, "Oh, absent-minded professor. Absent-minded professor over here. He'd forget his head if it wasn't screwed on. And a little insight into my mum. She just sort of has the same kind of script book of maybe some 15 to 20 phrases that she used on repeat to raise 5 children and dragged those kind of phrases with sometimes unfortunate irrelevance to the contemporary times. But she rolled them out and used them as golden kind of rules to live by. Anyway, one of those things, the phrases that I heard ad nauseum was, absent professor over here, he'd forget his head if it wasn't screwed on. And it wasn't very funny or interesting or clever at the time, and it didn't hurt my feelings at the time at all, because it was 100% accurately true. I'd lose school bags and hats and books, and I just, like, if something wasn't in front of me, it didn't really exist. Although the kind of professor part was, although at school I did really well, I always say, like, I felt like I peaked in primary school, in just like my own ambition and self-belief and things like that. So, strong reader, I enjoyed reading, would proactively spend my free time reading books and enjoying that, and felt like I was really learning. I felt like I became a good speller and loved language and words because of how much I liked books and stories. I also felt like books and stories early on, Tim Winton, John Marsden, the kind of like 90s starter kit of Australian youth literature, were all things that kind of gave me little peaks and gateways into stories beyond my own circumstance, which is very specifically regional, Christian, conservative, rural, regional, like living on a farm out of regional town. And so I guess my experience was like quite narrow. The only overseas holiday that I went on was to New Zealand. That's the only time I left the country. And as I was saying to someone the other day, just like a very specific set of people to be around, right? I didn't know one person consciously, maybe they had one secretly, that had a law degree, for instance, or a business degree. And I would say most people that I was raised around did not have a tertiary education. Certainly my parents and that whole generation of my aunties and uncles didn't seem to have any tertiary qualifications. I believe my siblings and cousins are the first generation to be university educated in some kind of way. Not that that's a marker of intelligence, success, anything, but as demographic data, I think it's quite interesting and relevant. So anyway, in amongst that kind of like schmozzly but great, upbringing that is still access to a whole lot of opportunities, and I went to private school for my last 3 years of high school. And throughout all of that, still managed to claw my way through. Often it involved a Phoenix ashes to Phoenix success story of this assignment hasn't been worked on for the whole term, that we're supposed to have been studying this or doing paragraph 1 or submitting a draft. I'd always find a way to kind of like get out of submitting a draft of something. And then by the time the assessment was due, it was a journey through the dark night of the soul into the center of myself to produce something that previously had not been started, essentially. So that meant things like I'd rely on my smarter older brother to help me with that assignment. I would do an all-nighter, but not without a heap of tears and tantruming and everything else. I would desperately at last resort come up with an excuse that I needed an extension or something like that and just buy some more time. And, again, might sound like pretty typical kind of, just student in a conventional schooling system, but these are very specific circumstances. I can also think of other things like where I did like speech and drama and performed in a Stedfords, where I would be learning pieces on the way to the event where I was supposed to be performing them. I can think of times where like the level of trickery and effort at school was definitely an exercise in my creativity and performing under pressure, but was still like, it's like a little bit mental. And by that I just mean we used to have like many kids, you'd have to write the words of the week or whatever, and the homework would be go home and turn these words into sentences. So to, I guess, A, prove that you understand them, B, can use them, you're improving your handwriting, whatever else, blah, blah, blah. And then we would sit in class and I would open my workbook to a blank page, having not done my homework, because it was just so unnatural for me to do homework. And I would sit there in class. Anyway, we'd sit there in class and would go around. And I suppose I gave all that context earlier about education and things because I don't think necessarily home life was set up for striking dynamic academic success. It was kind of like, come home, go play, do whatever, occasionally be asked, have you done your homework? And then if you just said enough lies of yeah, you could get away with not doing your homework. But we'd go around, one at a time, and each person would read either a sentence or their whole work or something. And I remember so distinctly staring at a blank page, but even doing good enough acting that I was like, so for the word environment, I wrote water, soil, and other habitats are can't read my handwriting, important parts of our environment, for example, right? I don't remember that was the exact sentence, but that would have been a word that we would have used in grade 5 or 6, right? And sitting there with a teacher being like, okay, good work, Kyle, moving on to next, and being like, here's where we'd insert an effect of the camera doing a crash zoom into my eyes in a That's So Raven style moment of internal, maybe grids in my brain firing and synapses sparking off in a fireworks kind of neural pathway cementing way that Kyle learns as the hero in his own life movie that I can get away with this. I did it. If I can fool them, I can fool other people. And on the one hand, that's been my superpower all my life. And on the other hand, it was also the birth of the very first, don't mix metaphors, Kyle, as if I'm not going to. Let's just commit to it. It was also the birth of the very first seed, the germination, let's say, of the very first seed that was planted, that allowed the kind of strong relationship with imposter syndrome to be formed intrinsically as a kind of Faustian bargain. As in, Kyle, you will be given the skills and assets to be able to get through almost anything in life in a kind of fake it till you make it way. And you'll spend every second of your life wondering what would happen if you hadn't have faked it and if you'd done the work properly. And that's continued through multiple kind of avenues of tertiary study, an undergraduate degree that I finished, other blah, 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 lots of things I've quit over the years, a master's degree that I did complete. But even then, I would stretch that Excel spreadsheet. I would put equal amounts of work. The most prep I would do would be in working out what is the maximum number of days at 5% penalty per days that I could still submit something and pass or get a decent enough mark and try and factor in the remaining time that I had left. Do you know what I mean? You would get penalized for every day after the deadline. You wouldn't just instantly fail. You get penalized, I think, 5% every day after, but to a maximum amount of days. And I remember making a TikTok about one, referencing Gabby Whips, the queen of procrastination, who would often document that stuff on TikTok in a very relatable way, even though she's about 20 years younger than me. And as part of that, it was you could just sitting there. I was like, okay, it's late. I'm going to get it done tonight. I need the accountability. I got to get it done. I got to get it done. And would I still get it done? Yeah, but it would still take 5 hours, of which I needed 4.5 hours to bitch and moan and wriggle around and clean a kind of couple of drawers. And then finally, with the cold sick in my throat of I literally cannot delay this any longer because I'm either going to fail the subject and or I have a full day of whatever tomorrow and I need more than 2 hours sleep. I need to get this done. And even then I would still be searching creatively to find a way to get out of it. Wild mental illness in the kind of just descriptive sense, not in an official kind of way, but for so long. It wasn't until my friend Brent was sitting on a couch one day talking about ADHD diagnosis, and me sitting there being like, oh, of the camp of like, I think it's overdiagnosed. I think everyone's just a little overdiagnosed these days. I don't know, ADHD, really? Does everyone have it? And he was going through being like, oh, no, it's like shows up as this kind of thing. I was like, well, I don't think so because I have that. And he was like, well, but also like this. And I was like, no, see, I have all of those. And he was kind of like, yeah, do you think there might be a reason that you have all those things that form the kind of diagnostic test that you have ADHD? And I was like, no, I don't think so, because I can get stuff done. I'm really capable. I can get lots of stuff done. For instance, and I cited in that conversation when Brent was just kind of like slowly, gently schooling me into a potential name for years and years and years of struggling with the kind of most basic of tasks and yet excelling at some of the most complex or difficult or high pressure or high stakes tasks, I said, I can commit. Like I think of ADHD people as chaotic messes that just can't get anything together. And I was like, I've done stuff. Like, for instance, I just locked in at my old workplace where they ran a weight loss competition. Now you might be thinking, Kyle, you're using sloppy language to describe something that I'm sure was probably like around activity tracking or habit building or maybe a health and well-being, wellness, initiative between staff. And I would say, no, I use the correct term, weight loss competition. Because this workplace, along with a lot of kind of just conversational ideologies that were probably about 20, 30 years in the past, waiting to catch up than they should have been, also proposed that we have a weight loss competition amongst the staff. My immediate feedback as someone who was quite new to the workplace and new to kind of just like boring, normal, it was local government life, was that I don't know that we should have a weight loss competition. I worked in a team of community development people, some who had, as part of their job, KPIs around health and wellness in the community, right? So doing things like fun days and subsidized exercise programs and trying to keep the community fit and healthy and active and connected. And I pointed out, like, this is sort of the worst way to measure someone's health or is to measure weight, to hop on a scales. I pointed out to them even in the initial email, because I'm a cheeky sausage, that you can cut off an arm and that will be a really, really quick way to lose weight. So I said you could even, and I made these suggestions to them, track daily activity and effort towards those. You could have a category that's around well-being and connection broadly, holistically, about like, have I caught up with friends or, had screen-free time or something like that. They being the kind of like EA to the CEO, I think, in some sort of other part of that secret mafia that EAs and PAs in the sort of inner sanctum form were like, oh, great ideas. Make sure you put them forward next year. Here's the sign-up form. And so in amongst this insane idea, I launched what I think is possibly my most proud oeuvre of work. Is that the right use of the term oeuvre? I'm going to just guess right now it's not. But I think it is the most interesting commitment as an artist to a cause, and that cause being the body politic. And I made it my campaign for the next 10 weeks, I think. But let's bring up the spreadsheet and check this fact, okay? To actually win the weight loss competition. Now, I'll just give you a bit of a it's not really okay. It's not going to be great, but just so you know, just so you could get a general sense of my frame. I'm not morbidly obese. I reckon at the moment my BMI, if that's still a thing, would put me in an overweight category, just because I am doing very poor eating habits and very minimal amounts of exercise. But people said to me at the start, you don't need to lose weight, and to which already we've entered into a problematic, commentary on other people's bodies. But I deeply agreed with them and let them know that I'm not entering this competition to lose weight for myself. I'm entering this competition to prove how absurd this competition is. So I waterloaded and spent a week or so eating as much as I could to increase my starting weight. And I made a spreadsheet for it. Maybe I'll share a screenshot of that. Oh no, just over my head right now, just so you know I'm not making this up. Oh, I could be making that up too, but why would I? I tracked other people who were participating in the weight loss competition, and I tracked their weights regardless of, without them necessarily knowing they were being on a spreadsheet, but I'd ask them casually on certain days how much weight they'd lost. And ultimately they were using a percentage of body mass that you started with, and how much you lost, and how much whoever has the highest percentage of body mass left, lost at the end wins. So in the end, it went from the 24th of January through to the 3rd of May. I actually weighed in earlier because I was going away to a wedding, and I was like, I can't fast and starve myself during this wedding. I want to have a good time, and I did. But ultimately, I came out with, in, I think it was 10 weeks. Is that about 10 weeks or 12 weeks? I lost 16 kilos. I started at 90. I got down to 74, and that's 17% of my starting weight is what I lost. I won. It was like $500 or something because everyone had to submit $50 to it. I would psychologically kind of go into warfare with other people and encourage them to give themselves a relaxed weekend if they needed to. I didn't need to do that. Even the people that were trying really hard, I still beat. This is all a long divergent tangent to say that when I knuckle down, I really knuckle down. For those 10 or 12 weeks, I had no alcohol, very minimal refined sugar. I was doing Pilates 5 to 6 days a week. I was running around 8 to 10K most nights of the week. I was also playing squash on the weekend. I was just squeezing in. And then at work, if anyone was like, oh, should we do a little quick yoga session at lunchtime? I was like, yeah, baby, let's get in there. And I ate the most bland, foul lunches of just cherry tomatoes and snow peas, celery and hummus, every single day for every one of those 10 to 12 weeks. I can't remember which it was. Anyway, I won. I brought all of that up in that story, and pretty much in as long-winded a way, to Brent when we were sitting on the couch to say, see, I can really achieve stuff. When I really think about it, I'm not a chaotic ADHD mess. I don't think this applies to me. And then he calmly explained to me that that's definitely also an ADHD trait, just a hyper obsessive, all-in fixation with an all or nothing kind of attitude. And he was like, and then what did you do once you'd finished? I was like, oh, well, yeah, then it sort of got really sloppy and kind of just let myself go again. And it was like, yeah, that's the kind of standard pattern. So to return to the beginning without having said anything at all, really over 23 minutes, you don't know how much this is helping me. What is it helping me do? It's helping me just to claw my way closer towards the goal of having a fluid and comfortable output of expression. I've already got some forms that I feel really comfortable expressing and creating in, and I have other forms that I feel very uncomfortable and I'm very inept in my kind of skill set of communicating in. So you watching this, the idea of you watching this, and I'm speaking now to people who aren't watching. It's a reference to two Zen riddles. If you know, you know. But thanks for the threat of watching this, because to be without accountability, I do nothing. And you all represent the cool, comforting steel revolver barrel against my temple. There was a TikTok of someone being like, I'm an ADHD accountability person. It's just a guy with a gun following someone around being like, come on, get back to task. And that's what I feel like. And ironically, even though I've left structure, I've left accountability in a really normie full-time job, right? I've walked away because weirdly that doesn't work either. The kind of conventional 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, turn up at a desk, because then I just got increasingly really good at being crafty there. And maybe we'll talk about all the best ways I used my sick days in another video. Highlights include Dreamworld, Bali, filming a TV ad, and many more. I would just get increasingly more crafty because as soon as there's an apparent cage around me, that's when I'm just like, no you don't, no, I'll gnaw at my flesh until you let me out, or I'll gnaw through the bars. Very odd. Maybe that goes into, maybe there's some sort of oppositional defiance, something in there. I don't know. Who cares? The point is that I'm learning to know myself enough that I can work with these things. So I think the sweet spot is not a kind of conventional work structure. It's me on my own time working out how to make money and kind of get my life sorted on my own terms. But part of that is that I still need accountability. And this is such a gift of a way for me to be able to exercise that accountability with people watching. So we've got to the end. I've sort of felt like I've set up something. I've sort of spent 27 minutes doing an introduction to introduce the end of the video. But that's where we are. Thanks so much for watching. Please leave comments below, questions, suggestions. Would you like to watch a video where I reveal all my finances? I think that's also another important part of becoming unemployable, so that I don't go back to local government ever again. But I was just like, why not? Why not the kind of practice in honesty to share the number in my bank account, investment portfolio, how much is in my super, just so you know, because I think that's important, because it both sheds a picture of privilege as well as reality, but just so you know what my hustle is, because I just think that would be fun, and I would appreciate if someone had have done that for me if I was a few years earlier into my career, trying to be like, how is everyone making this work? And I think a lot of the time the answer is with help from their parents, and that certainly explained a lot of my peers' careers, I think, where I'm like, how have you, you could take big risks because when you move back home, you get a house that's bought by your parents. And I'd take one too if it was offered to me. But anyway, let me know if that's of interest or any other ideas. I'd really appreciate. I know that you may not know me well enough to know what even ideas to contribute, but honestly, anything is great. Thank you for watching. Talk to you another time.